Hey guys, welcome to the weekly video going through the betting trends for the upcoming AFL games. Right now, we're focusing on round number 5. We've got 8 games coming up this weekend. I'm going to go through my early thoughts from a betting perspective for each one of those games, and also the betting trends and historical odds and lines and totals for each of these games. Obviously, only the 8 games this week, with Collingwood and the Sydney Swans both having their bye after playing in the opening round. Before we get into this week's games, though, I just want to quickly recap last weekend and what the betting information told us. So of the 8 games, 5 of those games went under the total points line. And also the West Coast Eagles Sydney Swans game was very, very close to going under the total as well. Here we can see every team's over-under record so far this season. The Adelaide Crows, who are the very best overside last year, are the only team still yet to have a game go over the total points line. And also the Brisbane Lions, who were another big over team last year, 1-3 to the under so far this season. There has been a slight trend over the past couple of weeks with games going under the total. I feel like that may even out a little bit this weekend. The important thing to monitor is what the bookies are doing with the totals. Hence the reason why when I'm looking at a game, I'm always looking at, okay, what was the total last time these two sides met in their previous meetings to see kind of how they've adjusted those numbers for the upcoming game. Also, last weekend, the favorites won all 9 games last week, and they covered the spread in 6 of the 9 games. However, of those 6 of the 9 where they did cover, Carlton, Geelong, and GWS all only cover the spread by small margins. Obviously, the Carlton game, there's lots of controversy around. Geelong only won by a small margin as well. The underdogs who covered last week, the West Coast Eagles covered versus Sydney Swans. Richmond covered the line against St Kilda, and Hawthorn covered the line against Collingwood in the last game of the round. But obviously, none of those teams were able to win outright. It was West Coast Eagles and Hawthorn's first games they've covered this season. So looking at every team's against the spread betting record, Collingwood only at 1-4 so far. They have the bye this week. Collingwood, like when I look at these numbers, I'm looking for teams that are really standing out. So Melbourne, for example, at 4-1, are the best team so far this season, but there's a lot of teams at 3-1. Over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, these numbers, there may be teams that create an even greater gap between their wins and losses. Either way, then I'm going to look to play the other side, because by the end of the season, a lot of these numbers close up fairly significantly. And I want to find opportunities where teams are going to be overvalued, because how this kind of works is Melbourne, for example, who are 4-1, the bookies are going to inflate their lines slightly because people have started to catch on that Melbourne are winning, they're covering. We're going to have to boost that line up a little bit higher than it probably should be in order to get them to cover. And we get the perfect example with the first game this weekend with Brisbane, who are 1-3 against the spread, and Melbourne, who are 4-1 against the spread. And this is a game where I feel like even with the line currently at plus 14.5 or minus 14.5 for the Demons, is slightly higher than it should be. Last time they met was at the MCG last season, and Melbourne were a 2.5 point underdog that time, and then they won the game by 1 point. And now you're being asked to take a line that's 16 points greater than it was for that matchup. And even though Brisbane have struggled to start the season, and you can't really put much weight behind their win against North Melbourne, they're a better team than that in such a small time frame, because that game was towards the end of last season. The previous meeting also at the MCG prior to that, the Lions won that game by 13 points. So this is a game where I'm going to be leaning towards taking the Lions to cover at the plus. And I'll also be looking at the over in this game. 6 of the past 7 meetings between these two sides have gone over. Last time they met here, it was set at 161.5. It's up 5 points, which isn't too much, especially with both these sides being capable of scoring. And their recent meetings at this venue has also been high scoring. So considering the over, I'm definitely liking the plus around the Brisbane Lions, even though it's at the MCG, where I think there's only won about 2 of their past 20 games there. And Melbourne do have a good record against them, winning 5 of the past 7. But at over 2 goals, and even if we got close to the 3-goal mark here on the plus, that'd be ideal. Also, what's interesting is the underdog has won the past 4 matchups between these two sides outright. So that's another thing to consider. Next game, Friday night, Western Bulldogs take on the Essendon Bombers. The Bulldogs come into this game 12.5 point favorites. And they do have a really good record against Essendon, covering 7 of the past 8. And they've also won 9 of the past 10. And also, just quickly, I noticed a comment during the week that somebody asking when I say they've covered the spread, 7 of the past 8, for example, does that mean they've covered the minus 12.5? What it's referring to is they've covered the spread for that specific game. So, for example, the Western Bulldogs covered the minus 7.5 back in round 19 last season. And then they covered minus 16.5 in round 22, round 7, 2022, both at Marvel Stadium. So that's what that's referring to. So of the last 8 meetings, the Western Bulldogs have covered the spread in 7 of those. The time when Essendon did cover was when they were a 25.5 point underdog and won the game outright back in 2021. Definitely leaning to the Bulldogs to win this game. Not completely sure whether I want to take the minus 12.5 or 1-39 at this stage. Probably leaning towards a minus 12.5. But we will wait and see. But that's most likely the way I'm going to go on that game. GWS take on St Kilda. The Giants are a 19.5 point favorite here. They've won the last meeting against the St Kilda Saints in the finals last season, winning that game by 24 points as a 5.5 point favorite. At home this time around, the line is a couple of goals higher, which is probably fair. The Giants have been pretty good so far this season. St Kilda has been struggling a bit, got over Richmond by a small margin last week. This total for this game at 164.5, up from 155.5 last time, but was 163.5 when they met in Sydney earlier last season. I'm definitely leaning towards the over in this game. And I feel like from a win-loss or like who's going to win the game perspective, I like the Giants to win this game, but I think the line at minus 19.5 is about right, potentially slightly high. But I'm probably looking at the Giants 1-39 for this game, as the Saints do have a good record, winning and covering 4 of the past 5 against GWS. Carlton versus Adelaide, and there is that bit of added motivation as well for St Kilda, who were eliminated by the Giants in the finals last season. Carlton take on Adelaide. Carlton 25.5 point favorites. Last time they met, they were only a 3.5 point favorite. Last time in Melbourne, they were a 22.5 point favorite. So this is one thing I talk about a lot, is the betting companies use this information here when setting these lines. The amount of time it's only moved slightly, and obviously it's moved up slightly because Carlton have performed better than the Crows, who have really been struggling this season. This game is most likely probably going to be like, I'm either going to take Carlton 1-39 or stay away from this game. I think Carlton win. Don't love them covering a 25.5 point spread. The Crows can kind of hang around in games, and they do have a good record against the Blues, winning 8 of the past 11, and they have covered 4 of the past 5. So I don't love Carlton to win by 26 plus, but we'll just be looking for a bet around Carlton 1-39. And I'm not like completely ruling out a bet on the over here. I think this line is slightly low at 165.5. Last time they met here was 174.5. The issue is Adelaide scoring points. I'm just going to do a little bit more research into the Crows as this week goes on, into how they're going to be able to score against Carlton, and then decide if I want to play an over bet in that game. But it's definitely one where I'm not looking to force a bet into that matchup, but I'll post the bets later in the week. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, you have notifications on, so then you don't miss any of the bets for the weekend. Gold Coast take on Hawthorn. The Suns are a 24.5 point favorite. The home side has covered the past 6 and won all of those games in this matchup. So home side is performing really, really well. Gold Coast won this matchup last season 101-34, and they have won 3 of the past 4 against Hawthorn. Hawthorn obviously pushed the Collingwood at the end of last week. Gold Coast were in the game until about 3/4 time against GWS. So both sides are capable of hanging around the mark against better sides. Gold Coast home field advantage is obviously big in this game. With the spread at 24.5, it's exactly what it was last time these two sides met. This is one where I feel like it really could go either way. A slight lean towards Hawthorn at the plus 24.5, but no real decision on that game yet. But more so leaning to the plus 24.5 than the minus. Port Adelaide versus Fremantle. Port are an 18.5 point favorite. Last time they met, they're an 11.5 point favorite. At home, they're a 15.5 point favorite. I like Port to win this game, kind of just how much I feel like they're going to win by. Could easily take the -18.5 or 139 margin here. Prefer a slightly lower line. It would definitely be a strong bet at 5 to 6 points lower at that -12.5, 13.5 mark. Just not fully confident in the 18.5. But do like them in this game. Total at 162.5, 8 points higher than their last meeting at this venue. 4 of the past 6 between these two sides have gone over the total line for that game. So they do have a history of being higher scoring games between these two sides. Home team has been very advantageous, covering 9 of the past 12 in this matchup, and Port have covered the past 5 versus Fremantle, and they've also covered the past 5 at home. So lots of advantages for Port in this game. I like them to win. Just need to decide what kind of bet I want to take for them to win. Potentially may even look at their team total over, depending what that's set at. Geelong take on North Melbourne. Geelong $1.03, 55.5 point favorites. Exactly what it was last time they met, where they covered that 55.5 point spread, winning 125 to 63. Prior to that, they were 65.5 point favorites and won that game by 92 points. So Geelong do have a good record, covering 5 of the past 7 versus North Melbourne, won the past 11. They're obviously going to win this game. Kind of just need to figure out by how much. This is likely a game where I'm going to look to the North Melbourne defenders and potentially look for some player props in this matchup, as the majority of the game is going to be played in the Geelong forward half. The total at 177.5, feel like is a touch high. The past 3 have gone over, but you can see it's the highest total of the last 3 meetings. And is very high, getting close to that 180 mark. West Coast versus Richmond, final game of the round. The Tigers are 18.5 point favorites, down from the 38.5 point line it was last time they met at Optus Stadium in round 18 last season, where West Coast covered that game by half a point. The line was set at 38.5. And Richmond won the game by exactly 38 points. So West Coast got the cover there. Very close. Richmond have a good record, winning 6 of the past 7 versus the Eagles. The Eagles, better side at home. I feel like Richmond 1-39 is probably the most likely outcome for this game. 6 of the past 8 head-to-head have gone over. Totals come down slightly, 2 points from their last meeting. Probably wouldn't love getting involved in a total in this game. And probably this really could be one of the stay out games for me this weekend. So those are my early thoughts for the games coming up. As I said, I'll post my bets for the games either the day before or morning of the game. So make sure you'll still have plenty of time to get those bets on. And just as long as you subscribe and you have notifications on, then you definitely won't miss anything. And in those videos, I go deeper and break down exactly why I'm making that bet, whether it's on a team, a total, a margin, or a player prop. I'll explain, what my line of thinking is going into making that bet, because at the end of the day, that's the most important information of what has gone into your decision-making process as to put that bet on. But this video is to cover the early thoughts, which way I'm leaning in these matchups, so you can start getting your thoughts clearer as well. Plus, you're able to view what the odds were last time these sides met.